This is the Doing Business School Abroad podcast. I'm Ken Globerman, and if you're interested in going to business school somewhere out of your country, this is definitely the podcast series for you. This is episode 2, Framing Your Vision. Welcome to episode 2. This is Ken Globerman again, founder of No Brainer. And today we'll be talking about framing your vision. So what does that mean, framing your vision, in fact, right? So in episode 1, we talked generally about what this podcast series would be about, which is really doing business school abroad. And when you're thinking about this, it really kind of goes all the way back to perhaps when you're still in the midst of your undergraduate studies, or perhaps you've already graduated from your secondary degree and you're working for a few years and you see a pivot point coming in your life, right? So this is where the vision of what you're looking to achieve first needs to get framed in order for you to make this decision to do this degree abroad. So where does that start? Let me kind of step back and again remind you of some of my life decisions. I mentioned in the first episode that I was kind of a quote unquote math and science guy. And then when I went to undergraduate school, realized that I was not exactly a math and science guy. I mean, I was good at math and I kind of liked science, but in fact, I was really more interested in development. I was interested in development and creativity. And that only came out during those years, sort of in the sort of 18 to 22 years old time period. I didn't know that when I was a teenager. So when I was younger as a teenager. So, and that might be the case for some of you. Some of you, I know I speak with many people out there who studied engineering, who maybe went through school for, English language and discovered that they all of a sudden weren't interested in languages or engineering several years later. I mean, it just simply happens. As we grow up and we experience different things in life, our likes and desires simply change. That's just the way it is. Very few of us operate on a straight and narrow path. So what do? When that happens, you have to take a step back and ask yourself, what are you looking to do in life over the next decade at that point, right? So if you see that being something different, this is the moment to pivot. And if you pivot, you want to have a sense of what you're pivoting towards, right? So this is a very important kind of conversation that we all need to have with ourselves. And if we decide that pivot point would be best suited by going and doing a degree somewhere in something around the topic of business, well, that's just a decision point that we find ourselves at. So what do we do next, right? I think the first thing that you need to think about is what your expectations are from business school, right? So, I mean, when I went to Stern, my expectations were that I wanted to have a more sort of end-to-end understanding of business. And I think that when you work for a large corporation, it's natural for, if you think about economies of scale, it's easier to have people repeating the same specialized task than have them involved with many, many different tasks, right? That's just natural. Unfortunately, from the standpoint of the employee, when we're repeating the same task, we sometimes find ourselves a bit boxed in or a specialist in a particular area and with limited knowledge of sort of how that fits into the grander scheme of things. So if that's how you feel, then business school, that might be the first sign that illuminates that business school might be appropriate for you. So for me, I had a great time working at Y&R. We worked on so many different media research projects. I really cut my teeth on how to write an effective presentation. I learned some additional creative analytical skills that I didn't know before. I learned a ton about how the sort of advertising process works. what influences people, what it means to try to focus on brand awareness in advance of advertising return investment. I mean, it was really an awesome experience. I think, though, that when Y&R merged first with a company called Media Edge, followed by the acquisition of by WPP, I sort of began to realize that there was, from a sort of big business perspective, something more that I was missing. I knew nothing about finance and accounting. And since we were talking a lot about media return investment, I felt that there was a big gap in my knowledge in terms of what does it mean, return investment. I mean, we myself and the folks on my team were never trained in anything related to return investment. So how are we talking about return investment? And I felt that that was really a gap that I needed to fill in. Hence, my goal was to go back to school and learn about finance and accounting, something that I kind of skipped over in my business, in the business part of my program at Carnegie Mellon. So hence, that was my expectation from an academic perspective. I think beyond that, the other expectation that I had in business school was to develop a new network of friends and colleagues that were coming from different perspectives, right? So most of my colleagues were all in the advertising industry, which is normal because that's where I worked. By going to a business program like Stern, I was now all of a sudden on project teams with people who came from healthcare, others who came from accounting backgrounds, folks that work for audit firms, folks coming out of investment banking, equity research analysts, folks working for Colgate-Palmolive and companies in packaged goods services. I mean, so there was just so many different types of people that it provided me with a new kind of lens on how to think about business, in fact. I mean, and short of starting my own business, this was going to be an area where I would be able to sort of, develop those types of relationships and gain that type of perspective. So that was definitely like an expectation that I had. Of course, there's the sort of expectation, though I'll say that you don't want your decision point, I would say now in 2018, to hinge on this, but there's also that expectation that you would sort of go into the program at one financial compensation profile and come out of the program having a different expectation on your financial compensation profile. In other words, you will go in making X and you will come out making Y. And I think that that's something that a lot of business programs like to sell themselves on. But I would actually say, now pivoting towards what not to expect, I think the world is changing a bit. And I would suggest to people to be a little bit careful if that's their primary objective, because I could tell you that, I learned from going through school myself that, sure, while those statistics that are quoted, on websites and in marketing material by different programs are kind of taking averages of what sort of the in and the out looks like as far as compensation. The fact is that the variance is quite large, right? There are people who come out of business school, sure, that get recruited by top firms and end up, doubling, if not tripling their salary. But there's many other people who just simply, even if it's of their choice, don't plan to go work for the Morgan Stanleys, the Goldman Sachses, the Googles, or the Facebooks of the world, and in the end come out, making maybe a 10 or 20% lift on their pre-degree salary. I mean, so the fact of the matter is, the output financial compensation has a wide variance and can go across the board. And I'll even go one step farther. If your interest is entrepreneurship, you definitely don't want to go to business school with any expectation of a particular salary point coming out, right? Because as an entrepreneur, your salary is probably the last thing you should be worried about. So I'd be careful with people who when they're framing their vision are saying to themselves, well, I'm making, I don't know, it depends on the country you come from. I'm making an average salary for my country now, and I'm going to school because I want to make an exceptionally above average salary when I come out. I think that that's the wrong way to look at it. I think you have to more have the expectation of what type of job or career path you're looking to embark on and determine whether business school is going to actually help you get there. So that's sort of how I would recommend that. So we've covered kind of the relationships that you might expect to make while in business school. I've also covered the personal decision of, let's say, filling in maybe some gaps that one may have in their knowledge, whether it be from their previous studies or from their initial work experience. And those are two points, perspectives that could help frame your vision. I'll touch upon a couple of more things. So again, this series is about doing business school abroad, not simply just doing business school. So let's make sure that we touch upon that as well. Now, for my friends in the United States, you may not understand this as well as others would, but when you come from a smaller country, let's just take the Czech Republic, if people outside of Europe think of Czech Republic, first of all, probably most people wouldn't even have heard of Czech Republic. There are people still in the United States in my family who say Czechoslovakia. Okay. That's how, that's where we're at in 2018, if you can believe that. And my family are not the stupidest people in the world. So, let's say you come from Czech Republic, even those who are knowledgeable and know what the Czech Republic is and know that Czech and Slovakia actually became independent nations in the not too distant past. What do you actually know about that country? If you're from the United States, you probably have simply heard of Prague and know that it's a very nice place to visit. And that's probably the beginning and the end of your knowledge about the country of the Czech Republic. Now, let's imagine you graduated from a university in the Czech Republic. Maybe it's the best university in the country. And you are looking for a job forget about the United States. Let's say you're looking for a job in the UK or France. You're simply working at a disadvantage from a brand perspective. Unfortunately, that's the unfortunate reality. The unfortunate reality is that. And it's not only Czech, it's many, many, many different countries. And that's ultimately what often draws people to come to the United States or Western Europe. And the list is expanding, by the way. I think that, or at least statistics show, that most of the sort of inbound traffic of students coming from abroad lands in the United States and the United Kingdom. I can tell you, though, that data shows that list is expanding, and now you're seeing people go to schools in France and Spain and Italy and Switzerland, in Netherlands. There's so many wonderful programs now doing a really good job at promoting themselves, and that's just the starters. I mean, Russia is making a big investment into attracting students to come there. The same thing in China, Asia. Schools like NYU are opening programs in Abu Dhabi, and many other schools are opening satellite campuses in different countries around the world, Africa, different parts of India and whatnot. So the point is, there's this kind of internationalization of oneself, and that might be And that might be a really important element of your vision. So if you're that student from the Czech Republic and you're looking to perhaps get hired by a multinational corporation outside of Czech Republic, it might behoove you to do a degree outside of your country at a school that has a brand and reputation that your potential future employer would actually know. So that's got to be a sort of vision point that you need to come to. And if that is your goal, then business school abroad probably makes a lot of sense. So pivoting off of that last point, I want to talk a little bit about simply the brand, right? So the brand of business school. Now, think about brand value for a minute. Let's take, I don't know, Toyota, right? Toyota cars. Toyota has a brand recognition around the world, and different people look at Toyota in different ways. Some people think of Toyota as a exceptionally dependable, high quality car. And some other people know it as sort of dependable, but maybe not high performance enough for them, right? It sort of has a brand that fits into people's kind of mindset, somewhere between Ferrari and, I don't want to mention any shitty cars out there, but you can imagine one, right? So it's similar for business school. So I think that there's sort of brand value that will sort of maybe not pay off over the next few years financially, but from like a social value perspective, could pay dividends for a lifetime, right? So part of my brand today is Carnegie Mellon University. Now, it doesn't matter that my grades were what they were, or what my performance was there, or who my teachers were, or what classes I took. Carnegie Mellon is part of my brand. So as I sit here in 2018, 25, 26 years since graduating from that institution, and I meet fellow alumni or other people that know the school, I sort of am part of the reputation of that institution. And I think that for some people, that's simply interesting. Now, for some people, it's not. Some people couldn't give a damn about the brand of business school, but many people do. So I think that you need to decide, what's your vision? How do you see it? And how do you see yourself, right? When you talk later in life, 10, 20 years later, and you're speaking to investors, do you see your vision as being someone who sort of like just, took school and said, the hell with it, who needs it, and went off and just started businesses? And that's great, right? And some people would applaud that and say, excellent job, good choice. Or do you see yourself as someone who wants to be a part of another type of institution, an academic institution that is going to be recognized around the world, and have that conversation with potential employers, with potential partners, or with potential investors? So I think that that's really a critical issue that you need to think about when you think about your vision as to what you want to do. And the last thing that I want to mention, which is an exceptionally important element of business school, and I'd say it's something that you see in most business schools across the board, and it's the focus on collaboration and leadership. So if you see yourself as someone who needs to work on your team building and collaboration skills, business school is a great place to do that, because most business schools use the sort of case study team approach nowadays. It didn't used to be that way, but I think that now most business schools have adopted to that format and realize the value of teaming, of people doing work in groups and teams. I mean, having worked with a lot of business people in Central Europe, I had no idea how valuable those kind of collaboration skills would be, because in observing and actually working with people on different projects, it became clear how much people here are not only work in silos, but are actually only comfortable working in silos. I found that people are simply not comfortable working across, sort of cross-pollinating with other people and completing projects collaboratively. But in the world we live in today, if you work for a multinational corporation or any business that does business abroad, you're going to find yourself running into cross-functional teams at some point or another, and you need to be able to operate in that environment. If you're running your own business, and you want to and manage your leadership team or your staff in general, you need to get the most out of those people. And the way you get the most out of people is helping them collaborate optimally so that information can be shared. Because let's face it, value can come from different places, and sometimes that's just simply not clear or doesn't bubble up to the surface if you don't organize yourself in a way that's cross-functional or where people are working together collaboratively. So most good business schools are going to provide you with that type of collaborative skill set. And along with that comes a type of leadership skill set that's really important, because when I talk about leadership, because the world doesn't need like a ton of leaders in the classic sense. Let's face it, organizations are moving from the vertical structure to more of a horizontal one. So the definition of leadership, I think, is changing actually as we move into 2019 and 2020 and so forth. But what's important is, in my opinion, leadership, not dictatorship, right? So leadership to me means inspiring people to be the best they can be. And so when you work with that definition of leadership, as opposed to someone just telling everybody what to do, then and if that sort of resonates with you and that's something that you want to learn more about and become better at and master, I think business school definitely would be a place where you can actually make that happen. So from a vision perspective, again, you have to see, where do you see yourself? Do you see yourself in that type of leadership, inspirational position? Or even, is that a skill set that you want to work on? Or do you just see yourself as a functional specialist? Because if you see yourself only as a functional specialist, probably business school is not for you, right? That is not the direction I would advise you to go in. If not, and what I said previously does, then obviously it's something to highly consider. So I would say that's really where this nets out. The next thing we're going to talk about, let me kind of now get into what's next up in our next episode. So once you've kind of framed this vision and kind of developed your expectations of what to expect and what not to expect from your business school journey, then you have to get down to like, okay, now what schools do I want to consider, right? So and most people will make a list. That list might be 5, 10, 15 schools, and we'll talk about that in episode 3. So definitely come back for episode 3 of this podcast series. And on that note, I'll wish you a farewell. Have a wonderful day. Take care. This is Ken Globerman, founder of No Brainer, signing off. Bye-bye.